Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Did you guys get much feedback actually from the jury on what was kind of the finals, or what determined the guilty plea, or the not plea but the guilty verdict?
Yeah, we did have the opportunity. All three of us talked to the jurors at different points. And we just got to be careful because you're just getting little bits and pieces from different people, and we just got to be careful because just to honor their decisions and what they want to say publicly and things like that. But they shared with the defense and with us. But it's, we just have to be cautious because we don't want to publish or make public what the jury said.
Of course,
on this case without that, so it respect the question, but we just got to be a little careful just to preserve the case and fairness.
Yeah. Well, who wants to actually describe this, the defendant, Daryl or David, is it Dalrymple?
Dalrymple, yes.
What can, what do we know about him?
Well, he's currently, he just had a birthday. I believe he's 67 years old now. He grew up in Nampa, Idaho, in the same general location as where Daralyn grew up, as a matter of fact. He grew up in a family that consisted of 4 boys and 2 girls, and eventually he was essentially a kind of a rebel growing up and doing a lot of crazy, wild things as a kid. He eventually was the subject of some criminal complaints over his youth and into his young adult life, and then essentially ended up in prison in I believe 2003 for a crime involving another girl, and this little girl was about 11 years old at the time when she had finally disclosed what Mr. Dalrymple had been doing to her. And anyway, he was convicted for, I believe, a sexual battery, a kidnapping, and a lewd conduct, and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Once we were able to identify him as the potential suspect, we at least knew where to find him.
Yeah, that it's interesting how our system works. And Ted, maybe you can explain this a little bit better, that during the actual trial, the defendant's history can't really be brought into, correct?
That's true. So with the jury trial, the courts do not allow prior bad conduct unless it has some relation, and there's some certain categories that fit within that. But the fact that he's been previously convicted, that's across the country. It's not unique to Idaho, but it's in pretty much every state court. You can't just introduce that the fact that he has a criminal past, therefore he committed this crime. So when the trial happened, that was not mentioned to the jury. There was nothing that was brought up that mentioned that at all. But I think what's interesting is after sentencing, and this came out publicly, is at the sentencing hearing, that little girl, that it started when she was 7 years old, that the case that he's in for serving time, and she obviously has grown up and she's a young adult woman. She came in and just gave a very impactful testimony about being terrorized and being repeatedly abused by this defendant. And I can say that the court in its ruling made repeated references to that. So it was I believe it had an effect on the judge just by what he said at his sentencing. But the other part that I think, and I'm not trying to toss it out or delete this, but Mark actually, interviewed the defendant, and that came out publicly during the trial as well. That interview process, and it was very. I think he has more insights about the defendant, and this particularly as to this case, because he was only, let's see, what he was 24. Do I have that right? 25. I think he was 24 when this happened. Turned 25 later. Yes. So the defendant was 24, but there was just compelling testimony that he not only grew up there, but he also was. We introduced evidence that he was living in that neighborhood at the time that Daralyn went missing, just down from the school, houses away. I mean, 4, 5, 6 houses away from the school where she would walk to.
I don't know about you guys, but of all the cases that I've seen, across the country, to me, it seems that the sexual assault type of cases, especially against children, are in many ways more damaging than even a homicide, just because of it's almost like the ripple effect, the long lasting, just it not only affects that person, but that person's family, and it just reverberates through generations, and the trauma that they experience, sometimes it causes them to turn around and be predators themselves. And it just, to me, I think, honestly, I think society would be a lot better if we focused more on these sexual predators and these sexual deviances and assaults and rapes and everything else, just because of that. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's just kind of my opinion.
I've worked a lot of cases like that over the years. I can tell you in this case, I'm very proud of the young lady that came forward and testified in our sentencing hearing. She's a pretty strong young lady, and I think she's really. I can't say that she's overcame some of the damage that's been done to her, but she is definitely living a good life. And there was a second person that testified as well in our sentencing hearing, and that was the mother of another young lady that I found that was reportedly victimized by Mr. Dalrymple, and kind of in the same age range. She wasn't able to testify, but the judge allowed her mother to testify for us in the sentencing hearing, and I can tell you that the similarities are very much the same. I don't know why or what prompted Mr. Dalrymple to commit the crime that he did against Daralyn Johnson, other than maybe a crime of opportunity. I don't know. I can't answer that. But he was certainly familiar with the area, which gave him an advantage. He was familiar with the school. We knew that kids would walk by the home where he lived. He was very familiar with the rural areas around Nampa, and that, I mean, he grew up there. So he just had an advantage in this situation. The behavior is very deviant. One of my frustrations throughout the case and just learning everything was that it's my personal opinion that I believe he knew. He knew that Mr. Fain had been arrested for this crime, and he knew that Mr. Fain was sentenced to death. And there could have been a high likelihood that Mr. Fain was going to be executed, and he didn't have to worry about ever being caught. He knew also that Mr. Fain was exonerated from this case, and so I don't know that the first time I met with him is if it was really a surprise that I would be there asking certain questions and asking for his help in helping me solve this case. But, it was a long interview, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, to me, again, that just shows, I mean, not only is this guy so sick and deranged that he would do something like that to you know, a 9-year-old girl. But then, you know, what a coward to just, he knows another guy is sitting in prison who's innocent, and he's sitting in prison based on something he did. And yet he was okay with that. Just let him go. You know, if he takes the fall for what I got away with, then so be it. Oh, geez. I hope he never sees the light of day again.
No, not with 2 life sentences now.
Yeah.
So
He's got 2 life sentences. I mean, and just so that it's clear, he is appealing those. So there's an appeal process pending. So he is denying, you know, that he has anything to do with this. So that's where legally it sits right now. But yes, he received a double life sentence.
Well, based on the appeal, is there a way that the appeals court, will they just have to make a ruling on it, or do you have to go through the whole trial again?
They don't go through the whole trial, but they will review his claims. He will be represented by attorney, and there's claims that he's making, and that process has begun. But I mean, as far as where it's going to end up, or what are going to be the final issues, or what the appellate court's going to look at, or how they'll do that, they don't redo the hearing, but they review trial testimony, transcripts, and go through filings and what was done and decisions made by the court. But that process, just like in, you know, that happens a lot in criminal cases, especially in murder cases, that appeal is pending. So we just got to make that clear, just so that it's out there that is the posture of the case. We're done at the trial level. It's done. He's convicted. He's sentenced. He has been sentenced to prison, and he's going through the appeal process.
Yeah, well, like I said, our system is pretty fair to even give this guy an appeal. But like I said, hopefully, it's unfortunate. I really wanted to be there for, especially the sentencing. My sister got married that day, though, so I didn't think I should skip the wedding to be up there.
priority.
Yeah, priorities. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. But well, guys, any last thoughts on the case and how it all unfolded?
It was an experience. Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful for all the work, all the science, Detective Taylor, Ted, and I would be remiss, I think Ted would too, if we didn't give a little shout out to, we had an internal investigator, Dave Krawczyk, who was instrumental in helping Ted piece it together, flying and or taking pieces of evidence to be tested, specifically with Dr. Green. So yeah, you know, it was Ted kept telling me throughout the whole case that this was not a normal homicide case to be working. And like I said, it was my first homicide trial. So it was quite an experience to come out the gates with, but definitely thankful for having done it. It was 27 days of testimony, 52 witnesses, months and months of preparation. So it was definitely an experience, but specifically to Francine, the M-VAC filters, and Danielle Reed, it was just, I hope every trial I have going forward is as smooth with experts that are as knowledgeable and flexible, because it was just really, really, once we knew where we were going, it was really simple to get there, and we had all the pieces lined up. So it was just a really team effort.
Yeah, you know what, Carson, I'm just thinking about, you know, with all the years that you're going to be practicing, and you know, the technology that's going to be improving during that period is going to be pretty amazing to see.
I'd throw out there, obviously, I mean, there's like, even the three of us, we're standing on the shoulders of other people that did work. And so we just pushed the ball forward. But I think one of the things that I take away from this even separate and apart from this case, is just the getting the word out to investigators. I think it's really important. I prosecuted in Chicago, so that's where I did like about almost 25 years there before I came out here. And I don't know how many, the word is still getting out about that process. And I just think it was really, really critical and very helpful in our case. And so I think that's an investigative tool that just needs to be, known that in the right circumstances, right situation, right piece of evidence. And again, I'm not an expert on it, so I can't even speak to that, but I think that needs to get out there. And then also at the same time, I think there's a lot of investigators that have no idea that hair evidence or old bones, that there's this process of whole genome sequencing that where maybe cold cases, there's DNA that can't be worked, or the limitations of standard DNA. This is brand new, and I don't think a large majority of the country has any clue that that's out there. So we're hoping both of those things. And it was a very unique experience to see how it supported each other. And as to the science, just prosecuting this case, I think there was just important things like it's the science and it helped solve the case, right? There was dedication and hours, but it's the science that solved it and was able to guide Mark onto the right path of like here. And he built a great case after he got the tip of who did this. And then that science was able to convince a jury, which was great. And then lastly, we did have a case where there was somebody that was wrongfully convicted. And, there's always murmuring and whispers of like, did he do it or did he do something else? This guy was wholly innocent. And that puts this to bed that this is the right person and that there was justice for him. And basically his pleas of innocence and the fact that he was cleared was really important. But most importantly out of all of it was this poor family, just to be able, honestly, it was an honor to work with them sitting behind us, the whole way through, and they finally saw justice. It's easy to talk about these cases. It's hard to really think about the family and what they've gone through and this whole saga. She finally, I think, at least as to finding the killer, I think the family now has peace that the right person is there. They've got the killer, and it's that assurance. That's so powerful because right before we were about to begin this trial, the dad, he wanted to know from me, said, Ted, I want to know, are we, positive this is the right guy? Not questioning anything. He's just asking that question. And if you take a second to think about it, this is the father who's gone through and the wrong person went to prison and has gone through this whole process. But just to be able to have that assurance, the science, and if it wasn't for both pegs of this, it is very easy now to tell the family, yes, that's why we're proceeding with this. We believe we can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury agreed.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't even thought about that, Ted, because I hadn't even thought about that. This family, Daralyn's family, has actually gone through this twice. They thought they had her killer the first time and then found out that was wrong. I'm sure there was some, I can't imagine that. Horrible feelings about that. Some innocent guys being in prison. And then all of a sudden they are going through it again with, I can imagine him asking that question. Yeah. You sure you got the right guy this time? So it's, yeah. That's a whole nother aspect of it.
Yeah. And the one other thing, and I know Mark is sitting right here, but honestly, both prongs of the evidence, but when Mark got on, the whole genome sequencing was used to do genetic genealogy, to trace. But Mark, it's good to have it, and not good. It's great to have investigators that are willing to keep digging and keep going. And Mark, on a two-prong from science, he's the one that called up the scientist directly and said, hey, this whole genome sequencing, you're able to get this to run for genealogy. Can you make a comparison? And that has just exploded open a wide, a door, to get that in. And at the same time, he's the one who takes the underwear where it's just dead end. And he's willing to push the envelope and say, hey, I'll drive this stuff down to you. Can you test it? And then did it and was clawing for funding and doing anything he can. And that's huge. If it wasn't an investigator pushing that science, it's just, again, the science is what ultimately, was what the jury relied on. But Mark is a guy, and that's what we need investigators out there doing, is what else can I do? Don't stop, don't quit. That's just another part of this case that's just unbelievable. And I'm sure Carson agrees. All the prosecution team agrees. Like, this is, I mean, we were at the end of this, at the funnel, putting this all together, and it was a pleasure trying a case where you had that kind of attitude. It's just phenomenal.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned it. In close, and I tried to shout out as many people as I could. And Jared, you said it at the beginning. It was just a relentless pursuit. We were not going to let this go, and it all finally came together. And then I guess also on behalf of the team, a shout out to M-VAC. My understanding is that the West Jordan Police Department only had 2 filters for Francine to use on this case, and it wasn't enough in her expertise, and she was right. And I believe M-VAC donated 6 or 7 filters so that she could do a full analysis of the pants, the shirt, and the underwear. And we ended up getting profiles. We didn't send in the shirt ones, but we ended up sending in the pants and the underwear to get those filters. So I don't know what we would have done with only 2 filters, how she would have prioritized, or what we maybe wouldn't have gotten. So a big thanks to M-VAC for that as well.
Honestly, it was our honor to do it. Especially being an Idaho boy, when Francine called me about this case, and it was really Francine that pushed it. She was like, "Hey, is there anything you guys can do to help us out with this? Donating some of the consumables to make this happen." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, pretty small little section of it, but we are honored to do it.
Well, thank you for that. I'm humbled by the whole case itself. I can tell you, for any investigators that listen to this podcast, there's options out there, and I think thinking out of the box a little bit. But in this particular case, we were able to, like Ted said, we were able to tie 2 different avenues of DNA for the suspect. And for me, I would prefer, if I don't have the evidence and I can't prove that, I don't want somebody going to prison. I never want to be responsible for somebody going to prison that didn't commit a crime. In this particular case, I have no doubt who committed the crime, and we have 2 different avenues that show that clearly. And the science is there; it's only going to get better. And we're able to solve crimes they're decades old now, and that's the wonderful part about it. And I know there's so many people that we could thank along the way that have done this. Donia Ballard, the person that had this case before I inherited it, that woman never gave up. She inherited this case after Charles Fain was exonerated, and she never stopped. And she continually just looked at one person after the next. And so all the folks, and I mentioned to you on the phone the other day, Jared, that I truly believe that there's some inspiration involved in this whole process. Having the prosecution team that we had, the people that were involved in the science part of it and everything else is truly a testament to where we're at. And I feel very confident in everybody's skills that participated in this case. And in M-VAC, I can tell you, yeah, I have another cold case right now. I just used M-VAC on again, and that case is a decade old right now. So I'm hoping to get some evidence out of that, and that will help our case. So
absolutely awesome. Appreciate all you guys coming on, and most importantly, Daralyn, rest in peace, and that she is finally able to get justice. And I hope prayers with her family, that they can also have as much closure as possible, be able to move on from this and lead good lives. But gentlemen, I appreciate your time, and yeah, it's as the president of M-VAC Systems, as well as the host of this show, it's just such an honor to be able to talk to investigators like you guys and be able to actually say, yeah, you know what, our system is actually doing amazing work out there. And it's just exciting to be a part of it.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.